A Hunter in Teyvat, Chapter 15, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Paimon thinks your ruined guard shouldn't fight enemies we don't want to kill. Paimon muttered quietly, and I nodded wryly, wondering if all my summons would be that ferocious. The Grimm that would be summoned in Remnant were probably just as lethal should a Schnee summon them, and it wouldn't typically be a problem for the Schnees of that world as the people they would fight in spars would have both auras to defend themselves to the lucky blows that can get past their guard and would have experience against the Grimm. Nothing needs to be said about using the summoned Grimm against their natural counterparts. I am not sure if it's just how a ruined guard is, honestly, or I need to be more explicit in the orders I mentally give it, I said, shrugging as we relaxed against some of the wooden crates that surrounded the hilichurl camp. Summoning magic typically follows the explicit meaning in your mental orders and doesn't consider the subtle nuances in your orders, Lumen explained with a nostalgic look. I had to wonder with all the world she and her brother explored, how many magic systems she had glossed over, not particularly caring for them, having already been as powerful as an Archon and simply not needing additional power. You have any experience in summoning abilities? I asked, wondering if she had any advice, but sadly, Lumen just shook her head. Sadly, nothing I can teach you that will help you. As different magic systems obviously have different triggers. Lumen said, patting my knee apologetic at being unable to help. Me and Lumen were currently waiting for those treasure hoarders to come try to rob us of the supposed treasure, and the hope was that Kia and other knights of Favonius would follow them into this minor domain so they couldn't escape. As we sat there waiting, we talked about Klee's antics, laughing lightly about how chaotic the little scamp was, and I blandly noted even if Paimon was just a mascot, should she learn how to make bombs out of alchemy she could use her own space pouch to drop bombs on enemies as she was floating around. Paimon will just leave the fighting to you all. I don't think I can light a bomb's fuse and hold it at the same time. Hee hee. She said apologetically, making me facepalm at how useless she was. Jake, how do your world's people get aura? Lumen asked me, and I almost reflexively shrugged, saying I had no idea, but that wasn't really true. Unlocking someone's aura, at least in Remnant, for people who already had aura, seemed fairly easy, as the process when you took out all the symbolism was just pushing some of your soul into someone else's and pulling it outside their body. But still, having one soul touch another is probably as intimate as you can get without sex being involved, and me and Lumen weren't that close. Aura requires me to push my soul against yours and then pull it outside, anchoring it to your physical body, which will give you the force field I have, and once you find it, a semblance that is basically unique to you, I explained, and Lumen went stock still and I saw her blush at my words. Lumen actually stuttered as her typically pale face took on a pink hue as she stared at me as if I said the most depraved thing. And this degeneracy is common in your world. She almost hissed, looking at me as though I told her the people of Remnant had no common decency at all. I couldn't help but grin seeing her so typically unfazed expression, being so embarrassed, so I brought out my silver aura, making my hand glow as I lifted it up and slowly brought my hand over to Lumen. It's complicated, but yes. I said, not mentioning how Remnant was an apocalyptic world that didn't have the time to worry about little things like how the souls rubbing against one another was so intimate, what with the Grimm threat. Can you give Paimon aura? Paimon asked excitedly as she flew around looking at my glowing hand at all angles, and I froze at the unexpected question. I was honestly a bit scared to give Paimon aura, as her background was never really explained, and what if I gave her aura, and her soul being healed made her turn into the unknown goddess that clapped Lumen and Ether back in Celestia, or otherwise she became some eldritch monster that matched her star theme. Lumen, you sure Paimon has a soul? I would have thought she had already sold it for a sandwich with how light she was. I said dryly, making Lumen burst out laughing, holding her sides with how hard she was laughing. Ha! No wonder she is so light, it's because she has no soul, and she needs so much food to fill up the void that came with the lack of a soul. It all makes sense. Lumen cackled as Paimon stomped in the air with her arms to her hips and began yelling at Lumen and me for being mean. A few minutes later, after we pacified Paimon by allowing her to eat all the raw ingredients in the hilichurl crates, we found a couple of chests and split up the loot. I could only thank the Archons that we never found any primogems, so although I may need to farm artifacts like any other typical gamer, I didn't need to worry about some weird super currency we could throw to Celestia to get their garbage weapons. Hey, kids, why don't you both drop those weapons and all your space pouches? A voice yelled out from the tunnel that led to the entrance of the domain. A dozen treasure hoarders cockily walked into the room and stared us down, armed with a menagerie of weapons, as shown by a guy wielding a pitchfork and another dude were armed with a shovel, and I couldn't help but giggle seeing some of the skinny guys in the back holding Molotov cocktails. I have an honest question. None of you treasure hoarders, as far as I am aware, are capable of anything of note, so why ask for our space bags? None of you have a vision to unlock it, and if you had the education to open it without a vision, you would be an accomplished alchemist and not be a bandit. I asked, resting my face on my fist as I looked at the group coldly, as I realized something. I remembered back in the LUS sections of the game, how the treasure hoarders mentioned a couple of their leaders being named something like Bandit Queen and other things. Point being, in a criminal organization that relied on robbing people and dangerous tombs or relics of the past. That the leaders of such an organization would almost certainly have a vision, as they certainly had the ambition needed to get one in the pursuit of leading the disorganized group that spanned all of Teyvat. Hence, with the leaders of the treasure hoarders having visions, it explains why the nations of Teyvat haven't cleaned up the multinational annoyance. Just shut up and give us your stuff, or we will take them from you. The leader said as he swung his large sledgehammer idly in his hands. Alright, Lumen. Let's just break some bones so they lament their life choices. I grunted as I stood up and was wreathed in silver light, armed with my saber as I approached the group.